There we go. Okay, so with that, it's a pleasure to introduce Aleatha Singleton and learn more about UX for XR. Let me find. Okay. Okay, Aleatha, you should have a hosting now.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. And I won't be able to see chat or anything while I'm presenting. So sorry about that. And you're able to hear me okay?
Yep. Yep, all good. I'm going to go unmute myself,
Okay.
but we'll keep an eye on chat and everything.
And that little Zoom thing's in the way. I'm trying to get it out of the way. So I can do presenter. Okay, so you can see my slide deck now. That's
Yep.
all good.
Yep. All
okay. All right. So, hi, I'm Aleatha Singleton. As I said, I'm a immersive tech UX design professional with over 22 years of experience designing for a wide variety of digital platforms, including most recently extended reality for many well-known and not so well-known companies. But today I'm not speaking on behalf of or representing a company. I'm talking to you as one professional UX designer to another. And I'll be sharing my own experiences and learnings as I walk you through my journey transitioning from designing for traditional 2D experiences to rich and immersive three-dimensional experiences in extended reality. So for as long as I can remember, I've always been interested in emerging and future technology. It can be fun and exciting to see how ideas that once seemed so impossible only a couple of decades ago are now being prototyped and developed in labs around the world. And I would often dream of being a part of that cutting edge innovation and ideation, thinking about how technology could improve lives and then of building it and making it real. And so when I started teaching myself to design for the web in 1997, it was still considered emerging. And it just started working its way up into the plateau of productivity on Gartner's annual hype cycle for emerging technologies report. And as the web was climbing its way up into the tech bubble of the early 2000s, virtual reality disappeared into the trough of disillusionment, since the processing power of the time wasn't quite where it needed to be to support a comfortable VR experience. And then many years later, it suddenly showed back up on the scene with the Oculus Rift Kickstarter campaign and the release of their DK1 package. And most people at the time saw it as a reemergence of the VR fad of the 90s that would soon pass into obscurity once again, and many still believe this even now. And sadly, I didn't have the money to contribute to that Kickstarter campaign, but I did see the value and the potential of modern advances in VR with the Oculus prototype and its ability to make you feel like you were somewhere else. And at this point, I'd been in a tech slump, feeling like I was stuck designing for the same technology platform I had been since 1997. But this new advancement reignited my emerging tech flame, and I quickly realized I didn't want to fall behind again. So like with the web in 1997, I began studying emerging and future tech again more seriously. In my free time, I conducted extensive human-centered R&D in order to learn, or if they didn't exist, to come up with my own UX best practices for augmented and virtual reality and other emerging tech so that I'd be able to transition into the space and more effectively advocate its early adoption. And over the years, I shared experiments and research with coworkers in order to gain traction. And word eventually spread, and I joined a side project with some fellow coworkers who were also enthusiastic about proving the value of XR within the enterprise. And eventually, an official team was stood up, and I became the first official UX designer in the emerging technology space within that company. And during that time, I worked with an awesome team of people that I'm unable to properly credit. They do know who they are, and I'd like to say they're the best team I've worked with in my 22 plus years in the workforce. So each year, Gartner puts out a report that illustrates the market excitement, maturity, and benefit of more than 2,000 technologies that have high levels of interest and that Gartner believes has the potential for significant impact. Back in 2015, the Hype Cycle report, Gartner had predicted that augmented and virtual realities would take 5 to 10 years to reach the plateau of productivity. In 2017, they were still on track for that prediction. And then suddenly in 2019, they disappeared from the Hype Cycle report. They had already passed the slope of enlightenment and had made their way into the plateau of productivity. Gartner states at the end of their report that while AR and VR are still important, they've already become integral to business operations and are no longer considered emerging. XR, which is the umbrella term for augmented, mixed, and virtual reality, is now used in the travel, medical, military, manufacturing, retail, and film industries, just to name a few. And since companies have started using these technologies, viewers are more immersed into film in ways never before possible. Trainees and students have gained higher levels of retention. Situational awareness has increased. Injuries have been avoided. Lives have been saved. People have gained empathy for those around them, and behaviors have changed for the better. So this is not just a fad, and it's not just a game. So if you're standing still, you're already behind. So everything we already do for the web, mobile, and desktop UX design is still relevant when designing immersive experiences. The process would still include discovery, ideation, prototyping, testing, building, and iteration. Now, although the goal is basically the same, which is to design delightful and compelling experiences that are easy to use, the platform is completely different. Instead of designing for 2D screens with a limited screen size, we're designing for another dimension in which 3D spaces and the world around us are the canvas. And this means that we have to shift our mindset to start thinking in 360-degree, three-dimensional spaces. And unlike with 2D experiences, where you can control what the user sees when, with 3D experiences, you have to take into account that the user may look anywhere at any time. And this is where designing for print or for real space, such as installations and exhibits, are very relevant skills for creating virtual spatial designs and experiences. And it's also important to understand movement in virtual space. Real world objects can move in 6 different ways in physical space by rotating and moving back and forth and side to side on X, Y, and Z planes. In virtual space, there are 2 types of freedom of movement available depending on the technology being used. And it's important to know which technology and platforms you'll be using before you start designing and developing so that you don't have to go back later and make costly changes. 3DOF, or 3 degrees of freedom, is mainly seen in phone-based headsets, such as the Google Cardboard VR and Oculus Go headsets. And it allows you to look around with your head, but you can't move around as you would in the real world. If you try to physically move your body in real space, the virtual world would follow you on a gimbal instead of you moving in that virtual world. And if you want to allow users to move around in this type of world, you would need virtual locomotion, which causes more of a risk of motion sickness. And there are methods and workarounds to reduce sickness, which are covered in the locomotion section of my website. 6DOF, or 6 degrees of freedom, is the type of movement you see in the higher end devices, such as the HTC Vive, the Oculus Rift S, the Valve Index, and the more affordable standalone Oculus Quest. And you can rotate and move around in virtual space the same as you would in the real world. And you can walk around, peek under objects, and interact with them as long as the experience has been created to do so. For larger virtual world maps or a limited physical space, you would have a combination of virtual locomotion and natural movement. The virtual locomotion still poses a risk for motion sickness when the real physical speed of movement doesn't match the virtual speed. Again, there are workarounds to reduce sickness, which are covered on my website. And as with any other traditional technology, different UX rules apply for each of the different types of digital realities available. So it's important to be able to distinguish the differences so that you can make better decisions on which to use for any particular project. For example, training simulations could be created in augmented, mixed, or virtual reality. If it's in augmented or mixed reality, the user can walk around freely. And in that case, you would want to provide information that adds insight while ensuring the user's vision of the real world isn't hindered by the interface. Whereas with virtual reality, the user's confined to a limited amount of play space where locomotion is handled in other ways. So to help you make more informed decisions, I'll give you a quick rundown of these different types of realities. Back in 1994, a group of people, including Paul Milgrom and Fumio Kishino, created the Virtuality Continuum in order to roughly illustrate the extension of reality from completely real to completely virtual. This is a simplified illustration that doesn't get into all the nuances of this space, but it is a good start to help you understand the major differences between the different types of reality. And this complete spectrum of realities is coined as extended reality, or XR. The X can also be used as a variable for whatever comes next. And I'll break these down, starting with the real environment, or as the Hockey Hall of Fame refers to it, real reality. This is the real physical environment that you're used to experiencing, but we're now, interestingly, or maybe sadly, going to have to start distinguishing from the other types of reality. And then augmented reality, or AR, overlays information onto the real physical world. There are many use cases and examples for augmented reality, but one example would be this wayfinding app where you're overlaying the subway line directions and information onto the real world based on your physical location. Mobile AR won't be covered in this talk or on my website since the interactions are still performed on a mobile device's 2D screen, and it would be best to refer to the HMI guidelines for those devices if you'd like to learn more about them. There are a few products on the market that can easily be confused with augmented reality, but more accurately fall into the category of smart glasses. And these smart glasses allow you to pull up information onto a small 2D screen with a head-mounted display as a reference, thus occluding the world instead of augmenting it. And while they still have a very useful application, they don't overlay digital information onto the real world in 3D space, so don't truly fall within the augmented reality spectrum, even though marketers and even some companies may place them there. The Tilt 5 AR glasses are actual AR glasses. They target the tabletop gaming fan base since it can add more drama to your traditional sessions with special effects and 3D world maps. And you can also play remotely with friends as long as they have a pair of glasses. They've successfully completed their Kickstarter campaign and they're in production and pre-orders are being taken. And on this reality virtuality diagram, there are various levels of augmentation, which range from traditional information overlays of augmented reality to environments that intermix the real world with life-size digital objects. And this range of augmentation is known as mixed reality, or MR. Mixed reality can increase visualization and collaboration with people in the room or with people around the world. An example of this is the Spatial app, which is in early phases and can be tried for free on VR headsets and on the HoloLens. And then as you move further across the mixed reality gradient, the levels of the real physical environment versus the digital environment begin to shift and switch to become more of an augmented virtuality, where your digital reality is then being augmented with the real world. An example of this would be the Locomotion, which uses objects in the real world, such as your hands, and creates virtual representations of them so that you can use natural gestures in the world. Oculus has also released hand tracking technology on the Quest, which works similarly to Locomotion. However, instead of having to attach an external device, the Quest uses existing inside-out tracking. They've also released design guidelines, which you can check out on their developer portal. Currently, there aren't very many examples of augmented reality, virtuality available, but as the technology advances, you'll start to see more arise, or at least to me, it seems to be trending towards being included in the VR category as an extra level of immersion instead of being its own category. And then finally, virtual reality fully transports and immerses you into a completely digital world. A great example of this is the demo of the work in progress on Beta Immortal in Unreal Engine's VR creation mode. And it makes you feel like you're actually there and you can walk around and interact with the characters and objects in that world. Increasing levels of immersion into these virtual worlds is made possible through the creative use of haptic devices and carefully placed physical props. And those levels of immersion are only going to keep getting more realistic as time goes by. So now that you got a basic rundown of the XR spectrum, I want to talk in some more practical terms around transitioning into the space as a designer or a UX practitioner. The team still has similar functions to what you would see in an application development environment, and it merges that with some of the skills more common in gaming and entertainment. You've got project management, visual and interface design, UX design and user research. And you've got prototyping and development. Motion design should be used for traditional web and mobile technology, but it's an absolute must for XR. And some of the skills that are more typical in gaming and entertainment include 3D modeling and rendering, environment design, sound design, storyboarding and concept art, character design, and animation and model rigging. So if you already have a background experience in these areas, then you're much closer than you think. And then even if you don't have these existing skills, don't lose heart. Any design skill from any background is still a huge help. Architecture, interior design, industrial design, and event booth design require you to design and think spatially in 360. Prop design and CAD also give you a leg up since you're designing 3D objects and working with complex design tools that can be exported as formats that could then go into a 3D modeling workflow. And actually the same with architecture and interior design for that one as well. And photography experience will give you an advantage with things like field of view, depth of field, lighting, camera angles, and exposure. And print and graphic design is relevant since things designed for print in real space have a correlation with XR spatial design, typography sizing, and relationships. And I'm sure I've missed some, but it's possible that you have a good starting point if you come from a similar design background. And if you don't, then you're a clean slate and you can start fresh, which can also be nice. From a user research perspective, it's essentially the same process. You're just testing on a different platform. However, there are some new things that you need to keep in mind that aren't issues with 2D experiences. And there are some important nuances to usability testing for XR experiences. But overall, the fundamental principles are the same. I cover these processes and differences on my website, so check that out if you haven't already. And the biggest change will happen on the content side of things. Navigational structures, information architecture, and best practices are going to align more with the game and entertainment design than it will for your traditional websites, apps, and desktop software. Menu designs, text, body copy have to be treated differently. That's covered in more detail on my website under the category visibility and legibility. And the biggest learning curve for designers is going to have to be the design tools in the software, since you're not going to be able to use the traditional wireframing and rapid prototyping tools you would for 2D applications. There are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, the industry's in the early enough stages that those tools are still being created. And secondly, you're designing for 3D, so you need to think spatially, and the tools should enable you to do that. There are some plugins that you can get to let you use XD or Sketch to create flat equirectangular images that can then be viewed in 360 degrees on a cardboard. And the problem is, if you're wanting to design for high-end devices, this will only get you to the initial ideas. If you want to prototype and test and make sure spatial design and placement of UI elements is right, then you're going to need to get into 3D as soon as possible. And that's very important. Photoshop and similar image creation tools are still used to create UI assets that are then imported into Unity or Unreal, but those images will have different resolution, sizing, and quality requirements than you're used to with your 2D design because of scaling needs for immersive 3D and the UI creation workflows in Unity and Unreal. And the quickest way to get started while you're learning new tools is to go back to good old pen and paper. Much of my design time is spent storyboarding and sketching interactions. It's a good way to quickly share your ideas and intentions with your team for rapid feedback. You can also use a technique taken from industrial design in which you create 3D props and prototypes out of basic crafting supplies, and then you act out the experience for early concept testing. This is a technique that Microsoft used to prototype for the HoloLens in the early days of development, since the headset was still being built, but they couldn't test on it yet. So it's a good way to design and test for technology that doesn't exist yet. And another important thing that you're going to have to start doing now is playing video games and trying out as many XR experiences as you can get your hands on. And yes, you have permission to start gaming for your career advancement. Game development has a heavy influence on VR development in particular. So understanding how NPC models behave in certain situations and what interactions are easy or hard to figure out, game mechanics, and much more will give you a greater understanding of how to design quality immersive experiences. And if you have the energy, you can start creating your own pattern library of interactions and designs that you think are great examples that you can draw on for inspiration in your own projects. I use video clips a lot to communicate intentions with developers and other team members. It really hits home how awesome this space is when you can legitimately include reference to Vader Immortal or the Wizards or even Persona 5 in your statement of work. And if you don't have the energy to do this yourself, good news. I've been creating my own pattern library for a while, and I just recently made it available to the public on my website. It's still in early stages, so there's not a lot there yet, but more content is being added regularly. And another quick way to get into the space while you're learning the more advanced tools is to check out tools like Sketchbox and Microsoft Maquette, which allow you to storyboard in VR. Both of these tools allow you to combine multiple static scenes into a sequence that you can play through to communicate design intent and basically do the digital version of paper prototypes for your experiences and concepts. Shapes XR is a new creation tool that lets you storyboard and create click-through prototypes in VR. And it's also multiplayer, so you can work together with your teams in the digital space. It's in beta and it's currently only available on Oculus Quest headsets. You can download it for free through their Oculus App Lab. And you can also use animation tools such as Quill by SmoothStep and Tavori to handle everything from storyboarding to puppeteering to creating fully immersive film. Quill is available for free on the Oculus Store. Tavori is moderately priced. Both of these tools only work on VR headsets that will run from the PC. And they also have a little bit more of a learning curve than Maquette, Sketchbox, and Shapes XR do. And at some point, you're going to have to get a basic understanding of how the game engines work that are used to create XR experiences. And even if you don't want to learn how to code in Unity or Unreal, the more you understand about how they work, the better, since they require a very different way of thinking than the traditional web or app design. And this is especially important if you're looking to join an existing XR dev team. Most of them want you to be able to at least place the UI elements you design in traditional software into the engine yourself, since this takes some of the burden off the developers, and it would allow you to create somewhat functional prototypes for testing. And if you don't know how to code, that's okay, as long as you can wrap your head around the way coders approach development. And this is because Unity and Unreal both have visual scripting methods that are available that you can allow you to connect nodes together so that you can create applications without having to go too in-depth into the coding side of things. So a quick rundown of the software to check out. Definitely check out the gaming engines. Unity 3D is used heavily for gaming due to its robust cross-platform capabilities, and Unreal is used for more cinematic features. Modeling software such as Blender, which is free, Substance, Maya, or Cinema 4D, and Sketchbox 3D or Microsoft Maquette if you want to design a storyboard in VR. They're both free and allow you to import and export assets. Sketchbox has the added benefit of being multiplayer, and Maquette has a mode that lets you preview how things would look on the HoloLens. And Shapes XR lets you storyboard and create simple click-through prototypes in VR. And it's currently in beta and is available through the Oculus App Lab. And then Quill by SmoothStep and Tavori are robust tools that you can use for creating animations in VR. And then image creation tools like Photoshop can be used to create textures, materials, and UI elements. And Adobe XD or Sketch can be used to create UI elements. But again, the specs for quality are going to be different than what you're used to with 2D apps and websites. And then Medium by Adobe lets you create, texturize, and paint 3D models in VR. But since Adobe only recently acquired the app from Oculus, it's currently only available on the Oculus platform. So you'll need a PC-based Oculus Rift or a Quest with the Oculus Link cable to use it for now. And for creating storyboard sketches and concept art, Autodesk Sketchbook app and Storyboarder are both free. And of course, Photoshop can still be used for that as well. And then you'll also need a simple video editing tool such as iMovie or Adobe Premiere Rush that will let you quickly grab and slice video clips. And the design process is going to vary by company, but for the most part, you can expect it to follow the game design and development process since all of the same tools and skills are needed for both. And if you would like an overview of Google's design process, they published a talk during their conference in 2016 that you would find very useful. And I've included that link in a PDF that we're going to be sharing out of all the things I've been talking about. And we don't have time to go through all the UX best practices that I've written so far, but I do want to give you a quick overview of some of the foundational things to keep in mind. Studies show that if a user has a bad experience with a new technology, they're more likely to consider all experiences within that category to be a bad experience, or are less likely to adopt it or give it another chance in the future, even when those subsequent experiences are higher quality. And that's why I say that it's imperative to the longer term success of new technology that the user experience be well thought out and well executed. Motion sickness is one of the most common negative side effects of VR experiences. And this can include a feeling of seasickness, headaches, general nausea, dizziness, vertigo, or even in some cases vomiting. And this happens when there's a mismatch between what's being seen and what's being felt. Or in other words, your eyes see that you're moving, but your body doesn't feel any motion. Many people in the VR dev community laugh at this and don't think it's a big deal, especially if they're one of the fortunate ones that don't get sick. However, it's very important to take it very seriously and ensure that the experiences that we create have precautions in place to reduce the possibility or the risk of sickness. And I've seen way too many examples of people trying a VR experience, getting sick, never wanting to put a headset back on again. And personally, I've gotten sick from VR experiences that ruined my entire evening. And now I refuse to ever play those games again. And every time I think about one of them, the first thing I remember is feeling sick. And I warn my friends away from even buying those games. And that's the last thing you want. So if you want a better return on investment for your experiences, take motion sickness seriously. Explore ways to cause objects to move while keeping the horizon steady and the user grounded. If you don't have a grounded point of reference, the reaction is similar to how people are more likely to get seasick when they're further out to sea and can't see land. You get a little better when you go out on deck and stare out at the stable horizon, but not as much as when there's land inside. If a very large virtual object is moving, the user can get disoriented and think they're moving, much like a car sitting in a railroad crossing. After a certain amount of time, the driver feels like they're moving sideways instead of the train. And you can avoid this by placing smaller fixed objects within the space, like the railroad crossing signs and arms and the foundation supporting them. And let the user, or in this case, the participant in the experience, initiate the control of movement. Start with slow and smooth motion and gradually increase speed steadily. This is similar to how a driver has less chance of becoming car sick than a passenger, since the driver is able to anticipate what's about to happen. It's also very important that the experience maintain head tracking, especially for VR. Even a short pause in head tracking can cause illness, much like what you would get with vertigo when the environment freezes, even though you're moving your head. Test the application closely for unintentional latency or freezes in performance. And with the human eye, your lens shapes itself to focus on different objects while the rest of the world blurs. And this helps your eyes focus on the targeted object while reducing eye strain. As you get older, the lens hardens and makes it more difficult to quickly focus on objects that are too near or too far. And when this happens, if something's too close to read, it's going to hurt your eyes. And that's why you see as people age, they have to start holding things out further to read them comfortably. And the current lenses in XR headsets are fixed focus, kind of like the aged eye. Only instead of taking a longer amount of time to shift focus, it's unable to shift focus at all. And this causes eye strain as our actual eyes are working harder to try to shift focus on objects in the digital space, which they can't do. And one of the first things that people say when I mention needing glasses to see in a headset is that I should just wear contacts. And people who wear contact lenses should be fine, and that would be an ideal solution. However, keep in mind that not everyone is able to wear contact lenses for various reasons. Custom prescription lenses are available, but they're costly for the individual and they're impractical for shared devices. Remember that most of us who need these prescription lenses also have to pay for our everyday glasses. And depending on the medical condition, many people need prescriptions updated more frequently than once a year. And it's not sustainable to have to buy new prescription lenses for each XR headset in addition to your everyday glasses each time the prescription changes. Tech companies such as Serial are working on ways to simulate real-world depth of field in real time by tracking your eyes and then digitally focusing on that area or that object, much like the human eye would naturally behave. And this will reduce the risk of eye strain, and the digital vision correction that it offers will also increase the scalability and affordability of XR eyewear, since it would reduce the need for custom prescription lenses in each headset. The technology is still in the works, and it's not currently on the market. So what do we do in the meantime? I would recommend that you evaluate the hardware to ensure that a person can wear their own eyeglasses comfortably within the headset. Also ensure that the hardware doesn't cause a risk of damage to the eyeglasses while wearing, putting on, or taking off the headset. And watch closely for signs of eye strain or headaches within your user groups. They'll often say it's fine when they're actually just trying not to inconvenience others. And in order to avoid eye strain and headaches, it's important to pay attention to the placement of text elements in virtual 3D space. Font size, depth, contrast, spacing, density, lighting, and many other things can affect the legibility of text and UI elements. So try to keep your text at an optimal viewing distance of 2 to 3 meters from the user. 1.2 meters is the minimum recommended distance for text content, but that could still cause eye strain. And you'll also want to keep blocks of text short and simple and follow real-world poster and signage examples when determining text sizes, weights, and spacing. And when creating UI elements and interfaces within a virtual environment, real-world physical ergonomics should be taken into consideration. Be sure to keep head rotations within comfortable ranges, especially when using gaze targeting or for longer durations or more repetitive tasks. And assuming that a person's sitting or standing still and focusing on something, the most important elements should stay within a 20-degree head tilt up and a 12-degree head tilt down vertical space. The main elements that you're wanting to be within the user's field of view with a comfortable head turn should be within a 154-degree horizontal space. An easy way to measure this is to hold your arms out straight and place your hands where they're still visible in your periphery. And then the maximum required head turn should be kept at or below 204 degrees horizontal, or where your arms are stretched out as far behind you as they can be to the sides, assuming you have normal physical range of motion. Spending time in a virtual environment can be physically and mentally tiring for people who aren't used to it. Be sure to consider the length of the time the user will spend in the headset for your application, and design the environment and the interactions with physical ergonomics in mind. When designing vertical spaces, it's best to keep the user from having to keep their arms raised for long periods of time. Otherwise, their arms will become fatigued and they'll start to hurt. The longer they keep their arms up in the air, the heavier they become. And in the tech world, that's known as gorilla arm. As hand tracking becomes more prevalent in the XR space, it will be all the more important to keep this in mind when designing interfaces. Minority Report is almost 20 years old, but if someone references the pre-crime scrubber, chances are you know exactly what they're talking about. During filming, Tom Cruise was using the prototype of an actual technology created at MIT. And at the time, rumors abounded that he had to take frequent breaks on set when filming the scenes with the pre-crime scrubber. Although he was in great shape, his arms were getting tired from holding them up for so long when interacting with the vertical gestural interface. So give people the ability to stop at any time. Besides fatigue, life happens and people need to stop for any number of reasons. Give them an easy way to do so. Give them an easy and clear way to exit, and give them an option to start back up where they left off. And remember that it's important not to blindly follow cool interactions found in sci-fi films. You need to know what's good and what's bad about it, and whether they're a good solution to the problem you're trying to solve. And there is so much more that I could cover, but we don't have time to go through it all today. I've created a list of links to reference the information that I've mentioned today, and it's in that PDF that should be shared soon if it hasn't already. And you can read all of the best practices that I've published so far on my website, the UX for XR Toolkit. Here you can learn more about transitioning into XR from a UX designer's perspective. You can learn the UX best practices for XR and dive deeper with video lessons. And you can see how others have solved XR design problems with the pattern library. More content is being added regularly. And be sure to follow me on LinkedIn, Medium, Patreon, and Twitter, so that you can stay up to date on the more in-depth content and resources I'll be adding in the future. And that's all I have today. So I will stop sharing and try to get everything back over to you guys.
Aleatha, that was fantastic. Thank you for such a comprehensive talk.
You're welcome. So how do I make you, do I make you host again, or?
I don't know if it's necessary. Yeah,
Okay.
I do have some questions here from the audience. Christian asks, actually, let's go to the top. All right, Carl Kaufman. Due to the debacle of Google Glass, any sense of how future rollouts will be broached?
So I think that Google Glass socially, people weren't ready for it yet back then. But thanks to social media and getting all up in your business and your privacy more and more every day, people are more willing now than they were in the past to do that. And I guess we can watch what happens with the Facebook glasses that just came out that are basically the same thing. They're cameras that, have y'all seen those, the Ray-Bans? They're cameras on your glasses and you can film short stories to post on social media. There's some people in the waiting room, hold on. I'll add them. I guess we'll see how that goes to get a better idea. But I think that as time goes by, people are more and more willing to let technology invade their privacy. I think that was one of the main problems with the Google Glass. That, and I tried them and I couldn't see anything in them because I couldn't wear my glasses with them. I couldn't use them.
So back in the day, they didn't make them with prescriptions?
No, it was just a band with a little window. So it's more like that RealWear that you saw in the presentation. That was just a little, it's not augmented reality at all. It's just a little screen with information on it.
Oh.
And so it's a certain distance from your eye, but it was a band with a nose piece. So there was no room for glasses. So you could wear the glasses or the Google Glass. You can do both.
Got it. All right, from Krupa, what are the energy costs of XR? How can this tech be made more sustainable?
I have no idea about the energy costs.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah, that's like, what are the energy costs of electric vehicles these days?
I was thinking about that one, right? Like it was an interesting question, but it's not like NFTs where there's a very measurable and almost obscene cost to them, right? Like with XR, it's really more about conserving energy and trying to extend battery life, just like mobile devices potentially. Interesting to think about. I think they're going in that direction.
Yeah, you have to recharge your Quest pretty regularly, depending on how much you use it. So I guess it's probably like other mobile devices that were in the future, probably more like other mobile devices and laptops and stuff. It's like, how much energy consumption are we? If that's your question, energy consumption.
Yeah, Krupa, go ahead and weigh in if you have if you want to get a little bit more specific. Oh, he said it was just general. Okay, cool. Great. Now from Kishan, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I am an illustrator. I would be more interested to work towards creating storyboards and concept art. So what are the right tools or applications to start learning sketching and creating 3D characters in 3D environments for XR?
So it's going to be the same. So you can just start with looking into 3D modeling software. You are going to have different requirements for resolution for your materials and stuff and your quality of your models. But there are tons of tutorials online. You can look at Unity and you can look at YouTube and just search for 3D modeling. And for sketching, storyboard sketching, it's going to be similar to film, but film, the difference is that film, you control the camera, but with XR, you don't, or you shouldn't, because you don't want to make them sick. So they're going to be looking anywhere at any time. So then you have to think in first person. So if you're designing for first person, it's going to be a little bit different. I don't remember if my PDF has info about that. Let me see. I can look.
And Jordan did share that PDF.
Oh, yeah, it does. Yeah.
Earlier, yeah. So we'll maybe we can go ahead and share it again, just so it's relevant to the conversation. That is a great list for people who are interested in getting into the field. That is an incredible list of resources there. So thank you for that. Okay, from Mauro, would love to hear your experience with usability testing. What software or process would you recommend for conducting user testing utilizing headsets? Things like recording user interactions, reactions, camera overlays, etc. might add some complexity.
Yeah, so I've had to go low tech on that. So being in the room with the person, and we would have a camera on them and a camera recording the screen of the sim. So it was PC based VR that we were doing. We have done Quest before. So I think what we did was used their casting, or we figured out a way to cast it to the TV so we could see what they were seeing. It's a little more complicated than 2D since in 2D you can have your lab and you can have your people separated. We can just have your facilitator and your person in there, but with VR, we found that it's better to have a safety spotter also in there with you, because most of the people that I was testing at least were brand new to VR, never wore it before. So they needed somebody there, a safety spotter, to keep them from running into walls and things. Even with the Guardian up, they would still try to go outside the Guardian. They would ignore it and they would try to walk somewhere instead of teleporting or something because they weren't used to it. So we still had to have a physical person there helping them and keeping them from tripping over cables and things like that because they're just not used to it. So a little bit different that way. And then taking notes on paper instead of typing them, because if you're in a headset and you hear someone typing, that can be disorienting. And so you want to keep quiet and just take your notes on paper. And you have to also be able to hear what's going on in the headset. So normally with a computer, you can just hear the speaker, but sometimes the headsets have headphones. And so you have to set it up to where you can play the sound audibly for everyone else, because it can be problematic if you can't hear what the person in the headset's hearing. And then cold water and vomit bags are a new thing, hopefully, to your testing. Hopefully you haven't had that problem with 2D. But you want to keep cold water and good ventilation to help reduce any sickness or discomfort. And then if they do get sick, you want to stop this test. Don't force them to continue the test if they get sick. Give them cold water and have vomit bags on hand, but out of sight, because you don't want to like influence them into thinking they're going to get sick. Those are the big things that I can think of.
Excellent.
And then for AR or mixed reality, you need to test on site, on location, because that's the best way that you're going to learn if there are any kind of technology differences or issues that you didn't think about or find during your research, like Wi-Fi blind spots, or whether or not they can even use that on location. Like if it's for example, a dangerous environment and you can't even have that type of technology in there, you can't do it. So testing on location as much as possible with mixed reality and augmented reality.
Okay, awesome. From Allison, where do you see XR, AR making an impact for those who are neurodivergent?
What is neurodivergent?
That's going to be like how people, somebody with ADD or ADHD. I believe that's right. Yeah, autism.
Autism. There's already been proven benefits with VR. And I can't remember off the top of my head why, but there was a talk done by educators in VR or XR. It's this group of people and they did a talk on autism. They had an expert there. I watched it. It was a while ago, but he did a good talk on, he saw the benefits of it, because in VR, they've, you know how in real life you have to study body language and stuff, and you automatically know by body language, if you don't have autism, what people mean and intend through that body language. But with autism, some forms of autism, you have trouble understanding those cues, those social cues. But the benefit of things like alt space is that instead of your facial expressions and body language, you're using emotes. And those emotes are pretty clear what you think. And so that actually made people with autism more socially comfortable. But I would prefer that you watch the expert talk about it. It's educators in VR or XR. There was a talk they did.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating. Can you describe what emotes are?
So in alt space, so you know your emoji that you get on your phone and stuff, the little symbols. So you can get those in VR too, like alt space, and they'll just like pop up over your head when you do one. So that's the sun is shining in my eyes because it's that time. So I'm going to close my screen.
All right.
Slightly better.
Okay, so from Eep, also hope I'm pronouncing that right. When designing VR UI, how can one balance between this is just a 2D UI, but now floating in 3D space? And wow, all the cool buttons are fun to interact with for the first 3 minutes, then it gets tiring. Do you want me to read that one again?
I think I understand it.
Okay, cool.
So you want to, as much as possible, create diegetic or in-world interfaces. So not necessarily just placing a 2D interface in 3D. If you can use an object to interact with it, then do that. You would have to use your judgment, but there are also, if you do need to use a 2D interface in your experience because of complexity or whatever, then placement of those UI elements, you follow ergonomics with that. And so Beta Remodal is a good one to study for that. The placement of their UI panels, and they use touch, but you're only doing short interactions, putting your arm out to touch something and then putting it back down. It's all about object placement within ergonomic spaces, just like you would do in real world, including your UI. How can you ergonomically place that? Like you place your desktop a certain way and your screens in front of you, your keyboards at this specific location for long-term work, and you do the same thing for VR.
All right. And from Gareth, learning the game engines and 3D prototyping tools needed to work well with XR development process is quite a big investment relative to the number of XR UX design opportunities compared with 2D. Do you think it's currently a worthwhile investment, or would it be worth waiting for XR devices to be more widely adopted?
So since it's a large learning curve, I would say start in your own time as soon as you can, because it is going to become more prevalent. However, it's just like with normal design. You have people that are focused on visual design, that are better at visual design, that and animation for your micro interactions, that specialize in that thing. And it's the same for VR and for XR. You don't necessarily have to learn 3D modeling and rendering to get into the design. So yes, you would need to you may need to place objects in Unity or something, but it's not as deep of a rabbit hole as you think, especially as more and more design tools come out. But so they have generally teams, from what I've seen online, they'll want to hire people that specialize in 3D modeling, and they'll want to hire people that specialize in different areas, just like they do for normal UX, normal design teams. So decide, you can check them out and decide which one you enjoy more, and then focus on those things.
Okay, so you wouldn't say that one would be more beneficial than another, just, you know, to a generalist, for example. It's just kind of what you prefer to get into.
Well, yeah, I mean, and look at the job descriptions out there, what people are looking for. That's what I do. What are they looking for?
That makes sense.
And generally they're wanting someone with some experience, but not, they want some experience in multiple things, but then they still want you for the thing that you're being hired for. Like if you're wanting to be a UX designer, the importance would be on UX. Did you have anything to say about that, Jordan?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And it's something, I'm curious from what you've been seeing out in the industry there. It reminds me a little bit of like the early days of UX when we didn't really have specializations, even before UX was UX, you had web designers and then it was called something else. And then people started to specialize in mobile, some people specialized in research, like it really, and I'm wondering like, one, are you seeing specialized roles emerge like in UX in general? Like, the one that comes immediately to mind to me is like spatial audio and thinking about like, that is a real area of specialization where some of the I think with Apple in particular, they are reportedly going to change the world next year with spatial audio in their AR headset. Although I wish I had $1 for every time I heard that Apple was going to change the world next year with AR, because I'd probably be able to afford whatever it is they're going to release at some point. But yeah, I'm wondering, so have you seen like one, are there specialized UX roles that you've seen out there? And if not, currently, is there anything you see on the horizon that if someone were looking for a niche, I think the advice that like right now there's a learning curve, and it's a lot of this has been, passion projects for I think a lot of people in this field, because the technology itself is very exciting, but curious to like what trends you might see coming down the pike that people could explore.
So there are already some specializations that are just transitioning from normal game design into VR because it's all the same tools, a lot of the same process. So you've already got your spatial designers, your environment designers, your modelers, your riggers and stuff. All of that's the same from game. So if you want to get into that stuff, then you can. The new thing that it's new for game design too, sadly, is UX. Even the game design industry isn't so great at it always. So that is user experience is the part, all the best practices, like kind of the highlights I went over today. Those are the things that are important that people need to know that most of the developers don't, unless they just learn over time the hard way, which a lot of us do. So what I've seen, I've looked at Microsoft and Google and Facebook, and for UX jobs, they want you to know UX. They want you to know the process and stuff for that. And then they'll want you to know a little bit of Unity, enough to like rapid prototype or something. It's not a ton that you have to learn to do that. But so it's basically what I was saying during the talk. It's like, you want to know a little bit of Unity, but your important thing is knowing the differences in how to test and design for VR. And what is that process? What are those artifacts that you need? You need to be a little more open to changing the way you work for VR because it is different. It's in 360 space. So your red lines are not going to work. If you do detailed red line specs, don't bother. For the most part, don't bother. It's just a different way of working. So you're going to have different artifacts. And those are the differences or what you need to learn.
Awesome. Thank you.
Did that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Let me see. Do we have any other questions out there?
It looks like Sandra Fang was wondering, Aleatha, if you could share your slides in the chat.
Share the slides. It's a very huge keynote. So with videos, so that would be very big.
Yeah.
Y'all are recording it though, right?
We are. So we'll post a link to the video on our YouTube channel. Again, shameless plug to help get us to 100 subscribers there. But yeah, we'll post the video there so you'd be able to recap it. And then I think a lot of the resources that you mentioned are available in that PDF document too.
Mm-hmm. And all of the best practices and stuff are on that website. So you're going to get it in different format. So you don't need deck really.
Awesome. I'm going to put a link to the YouTube channel in here too. And then we'll also put a link back to your website as well.
And then we'll go ahead and save the chat and maybe post that in our Slack. Jordan, what do you think?
Oh, yeah, sounds good. Awesome. Thank you, Mauro. Okay, that puts us at, what are we up to? 40 subscribers, only 60 to go. Awesome. Cool. So any other questions out there? So I think with that, let me go, please, everybody, let's give Aleatha a round of applause. Thank you so much for joining tonight. This has been really, really informative and useful. And I know we've been talking about trying to put together an XR themed event all year. So really, really, excited that you're able to do this for us. And
thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So with that, everybody have a great night. We will get the YouTube video up shortly. And yeah, other than that, we will send out the invite for our October meetup probably next week. And with that, we look forward to seeing you then.
One more thing, Jordan, before you sign off. We are looking for more volunteers, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. How should they reach out to us?
That's a great question. So first, I would say, definitely look us up on DCUX Slack. That is probably the most direct way. Let me put the link in here. But also, feel free to drop me an email at president@uxpadc.org. At some point, we may get rid of those like role titles. I think we may go to a little bit more flatter structural, but for right now, that'd be the best way to reach out to me. We are also probably going to put out a leadership interest form, probably at some point in October, as we try to figure out, so basically, long story short, UXPADC has been, as we mentioned at the beginning of the call, we've been around for 20 years. And a lot's changed in that 20-year period. So we're going to be doing a lot of thinking over the next few months about, how do we update the organization for, for modern times. And so, yeah, it's a great opportunity, I think, for people to get involved and actually help shape what is it, what do we actually do with the chapter and with the community. So thank you for throwing that in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're talking about, we're talking about getting people sort of interested in taking on leadership roles, and what does that look like? How can those people get involved?
Sure. So really, we are primarily focused on getting back to doing monthly, events like this, where we present topics really, that are of interest to the UX community. We have a lot of interest in professional development, a lot of interest in networking, and we're trying to think of how can we, hopefully at some point, we're going to go back to in-person events as well, and even larger conferences. But in the meantime, we're looking for people interested in organizing those type of events. So that can be event planning like this one. It can be marketing and communications. We've talked about trying to get a newsletter back together. Promoting things on social media, stuff like that. Social events is another area where we've been trying to think about how can we do more social themed events in this sort of online era and get back to doing them in person. And really, it's kind of wide blue ocean right now. Like UXPA International itself is also kind of asking the question, what does it mean to be a chapter? What benefit is it of there? And very much looking for, I know when I first joined UXPA, probably about 8 years ago, I was new to UX, and I was transitioning from being a web designer, and found the community really, really supportive, and met a lot of great people and learned a lot about UX as a field. And that's one of the things that we really want to try to keep going. So
awesome. All right. And so if anyone's interested in volunteering, being part of the board, or in a leadership capacity, president, vice president, secretary, treasury, if you're interested in that, then definitely reach out to Jordan on Slack, or yeah, I think that's probably the best way.
Yeah, and again, we're probably going to rethink everything about how it's structured. So it's a good opportunity to come on early and help shape an organization.
Awesome.
A lot of potential for impact.
Awesome. All right, that's all I got, Jordan.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren, and thank you again, Aleatha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
All right, guys.
Good night. Thanks for coming.